The pandemic has been a difficult time for everyone, and we need to get some stimulus checks out there to help ordinary people. Or billionaires. Billionaires need to be helped. That's what I meant to say. We need to get stimulus checks to billionaires. It's already happening. You're all familiar that the pandemic precipitated the biggest wealth transfer in history. You'll all be familiar that billionaires have been using this time to shoot up into space and have a little look down at their playgrounds that we live upon. Well, here's a news story that's going to shock you to your sexy little core. Let's get into it. In March 2020, as the first wave of coronavirus infections all but shut down the United States economy, Congress passed a $2.2 trillion relief package called the CARES Act. They're good at naming them acts, aren't they? Patriot Act, CARES Act. Over here we do things like the snuggly, cuddly old bunny bill. And you find out, what's that? We're spying on you. The centrepiece of the law was an emergency payment to over 150 million American households that needed help. So far, so good. Little bit of help for ordinary people. Surely a good thing. Ira Renner, worth $3.7 billion according to Forbes, did not appear to need the cash infusion offered by the CARES Act. After all, his 62,000 square foot Hamptons home is one of the largest in the country, so he was unlikely to get cabin fever during lockdown, let alone have trouble buying food. Nevertheless, Renner, who made his fortune as a corporate raider in the 80s and 90s, got a $2,400 cheque from the government. That's ridiculous. Now, obviously, to a billionaire, $2,400 ain't much. But if you were to look at perhaps a welfare payment or an incremental rise or the kind of money that people work in at Amazon or Walmart or McDonald's or all them other jobs that require food stamp support, this $2,400 is significant. And of course, it'll be significant when it's all added together. And of course, yet more importantly, it's indicative of a kind of mental numbness, a kind of stupidity and unconscious attitude to the way that the world, or in this case America, could be governed, should be governed. George Soros, who I know you love, the prominent hedge fund manager and philanthropist who's worth $8.6 billion, didn't need the CARES cash either. Neither did his son Robert, himself worth hundreds of millions. Even if Robert did get in some financial trouble, you'd think that George Soros, being a billionaire and a philanthropist, and his dad, is perfectly positioned to help out a little bit. Give us a little bit of money. No, but you're George Soros. Leave me alone. But you're a philanthropist. Get away from me. But I'm your son. Okay, you can have $2,400, but only because I got it from the government. ProPublica, using its trove of IRS records, identified at least 18 billionaires who received stimulus payments which were funded by US taxpayers in the spring of 2020. Hundreds of other ultra-wealthy taxpayers also got checks. The wealthy taxpayers who received the stimulus checks got them because they came in under the government's income threshold. In fact, they reported way less taxable income than that, even hundreds of millions less after they used business write-offs to wipe out their gains. Again, what this indicates is that people that are actually and in effect billionaires can pose as bankrupt or not having any money at all, or start a fund over here that funnels this money. Oh, that weren't my money. Or they can avoid tax by setting up all sorts of crazy pacts. It's a ridiculous system that if the people doing it sort of had different accents and smoked cigars, you would just call it crime. You would just say, well, this is crime. Let's change it. This isn't the best way to run the system, is it? Like, and all the time you watch politicians on TV talking about the problems of climate change and inequality and all of the problems socially that we're dealing with, you think, well, do something meaningful about the waste of resources and the inefficiencies in the system. And of course, the reason they don't is because the system is supported by them. The system paid for them. They're paid for by those same people. They're part of the same, they're all in relationship with one another. This isn't conspiracy, corruption, tinfoil hat territory. This is just like, you can like blindly watching something unfold, watching digits on a screen. This is just how it operates. ProPublica found 270 taxpayers who collectively disclosed $5.7 billion in income according to their previous tax return, but who were able to deploy deductions at such a massive scale that they qualified for stimulus checks. They've gone too far there, haven't they? They've lied so much that they've actually gone from making themselves looking too rich to actually poor. They've overdone it. Oh, no, it looks like I earned $2 billion, but actually I spent all this on, like, that was wages, that was on helicopters, that was on jets. Oh my God, you must be broke. I am basically broke. Do you need a stimulus check? Yeah, at very least, I need a stimulus check. Consider two stimulus recipients with similarly huge incomes in 2018. Timothy Headington is an oil mogul, a real estate developer, and worth 1.4 billion. He had 62 million in income in 2018, but after $342 million in write-offs, his final result was a negative 280 million. For all my work, do you know how much I earned? Go on. Nothing. I actually lost $280 million. If my work caused me to lose $280 million, I'd just stay at home. Do you want to stop working? You're obviously rubbish at it. You've lost 280 million quid. Oh no, it gives a little bit of stimulus. The same was true of Renner, whose $64 million in income that year was erased by 355 million in deductions for a final total of negative 291 million. Another person useless at their job. Now, we're all aware, if you're not dirt poor struggling, people have accountants and accounts say this is your expenses and all that kind of stuff, I recognise. But there is a difference between a person who's earning money from doing a job that's connected to reality, declaring that there was some expenditure involved, and what is plainly corporate corruption of such a garish scale that it actually tips the balance into receiving stimulus packages. Like, imagine that this whole thing was sincere. Like, oh my God, are you all right? You've actually got no money. Yeah, I'm broke, buddy. My real estate ain't working. The oil games are killing me, baby. Goddamn electric cars. Although I've invested in them as well. Yeah, you best have a stimulus check. Thank you. I can barely hold it. I'm trembling from malnutrition. Do you want some food stamps? Yeah, who pays for these? Same people who pay for the stimulus. These idiots. As ProPublica reported earlier this year, the wealthiest taxpayers often have great flexibility in and when they take taxable income. Flexibility, that's what they call it. Allowing them to pay a minuscule portion of their wealth growth in taxes. The ultra-wealthy have other tax advantages. Many can tap a particularly generous vein of deductions, businesses they own. They can wipe out all their income, even for years to come, unlike other deductions like those for charitable giving. Certain industries, like real estate or oil and gas, are a well-known source of tax benefits that can generate paper losses even for a successful business. Do you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of when you tell a lie and then you get into the lie so much that you sort of start to believe it yourself. Oi, why are these earrings by the bed? Those earrings were going to be a present for you because I love you so much. Oh, you beautiful man. Have a stimulus check. Billionaires often reap sizable tax deductions from owning sports teams, such as a ProPublica story this year detailed. A number of sports teams' owners were among the recipients of stimulus payments. Terence Pegula, who is worth $5.7 billion and owns both the NFL's Buffalo Bills and the NHL Buffalo Sabres, was one. You own actual football teams. I suppose what it makes me feel when I hear that is not that, again, as I often say, that it makes me want to condemn or witch hunt individuals for using a system that's plainly available. That's sort of what people do in that position. But to help us to recognise together that the intransigence that we are told exists is feigned. It's not impossible to change things. Every single week, we're going to tell you things that could change, that are there because they are beneficial. They're not there because it's the only option. They're there because it's the best option for the people with the most power. And it stands to reason, doesn't it, that society is organised by the powerful, for the powerful. So whenever you find yourself full of disdain, loathing, or even hatred for people or groups or institutions, check mentally, what power does that institution, group, or individual have? If it's no power, it's just a victim. Also getting the check was Glenn Taylor, worth $2.8 billion, who earlier this year struck a deal to sell Minnesota's NBA and WNBA teams for $1.5 billion. Pegula and Taylor did not respond for requests to comment. Of course they didn't, because they can't sit there and sort of pretend they're at a soup kitchen or like they're Eddie Murphy in Trading Places putting themselves along on a skateboard, dirt poor, when they own actual sports teams. Furthermore, those sports teams are a public entity dependent on the goodwill and love of fans that spend money on merchandise and tickets and overpriced food items that probably cause botulism. And if they hear those people having to speak publicly about their tax arrangements, the unfairness, which seems particularly ridiculous when connected to sport, because sport is about competition and challenges and operating within a regulatory system and seeing who can win and who can achieve. And that's exactly what this system tells us it is. It becomes almost too ironic. Some taxpayers had enough in deductions to wipe out even hundreds of millions in income. Robert Dart is a scion of the Dart family, which owns Dart Container Corp, the maker of the iconic red Solo cup. Is that them cups that you see at parties in American films when they've got them cups? That'll be that, wouldn't it? Nice. I do like his cups. In 2018, he reported income exceeding 300 million. That's a lot of cups. But deductions left him with a final result of negative 39 million. How are you making them cups? Oh, it's complicated, you know. We put a lot of time into it. We get them designed by very, very expensive designers. We make them under the water. A lot of our employees are geniuses. Some of them can't see properly. The whole endeavour is more like an opera, really, than cup manufacture. Every year, in fact, we lose about 39 million, but we like making them red cups so bloody much, we just plough on. As long as you've got your red cups, yeah, we'll keep going. Here's this little stimulus, would you? Dart and his brother renounced their US citizenship decades ago to take advantage of a then existing tax break available for expatriates. Dart filed his US tax return from an address in the Cayman Islands but got a stimulus payment just the same as... No one lives in the Cayman Islands, it's just filing cabinets and people chuckling. The IRS declined to comment. And they've got no common sense when they're issuing these stimulus checks. Where are we sending this one? It's to an address in the Cayman Islands. Well, he's probably all right then. What about this one? This is going to number 1, Billionaire Row, Comfy Town. Oh, you better get that one sent fast. For former Lehman Brothers CEO Richard Fuld, a big salary was a key part of the 400 million he earned in the 5 years before the firm's historic collapse. I mean, I'm beginning to think that perhaps the historic collapse was in some way related to overpaying some of the staff. I don't know why we can't keep this business together. Let's just have a look at the accounts. Right. 400 million that's for the chairperson. Cleaners, they're getting 100 million each. Hamburgers, that's 200 million. You're meant to be running a finance firm. But in recent years, he's been running a company called Matrix Investment Partners. Well, that's reassuring. That he set up to invest his own money. The tax losses generated by that company were one reason he got a stimulus check. Reached by phone and asked whether he wanted to comment. Fuld said, "I'm not interested, thank you." Well, of course he did. Another CARES Act beneficiary was Eric Prince, who before deductions had 5.3 million in income. In 2018, Prince founded Blackwater, which is a really inspiring name for any company. Welcome to Blackwater. A private military company that received hundreds of millions in government contracts. There are two things that make the wealthy status of this man obvious. One, his name Eric is spelled with a K, and two, his surname is Prince. He has denounced excess government spending by saying, "We're being bled dry by debt." Prince didn't respond to a request for comment. It's a wonderful story in a way because the figures of the stimulus checks that were given to these billionaires is not particularly significant. But what it reveals is that in concealing their wealth, the wealthy have made themselves actually look worthy of stimulus payments. That's how thorough, deep and evading the mask is. Isn't it ridiculous that people that have got loads of money don't just participate in society in a meaningful way to the point where they're actually registering as poor? A proposal in the Democrats' once 3.5 trillion, now under 2 trillion, Build Back Better legislation. Like, they're not building back better, they're building back the same by awarding money to already powerful people. I'm starting to think that the whole function of government is to extract money from ordinary people, from the public purse, and put it in the hands of private organisations. That's the whole function of it. That's what it does. And meanwhile, quashes rebellion, dissent, and anger as it carries out this con. Build Back Better, currently the subject of fevered negotiations, would theoretically curb the ability of wealthy taxpayers to report negative income. The idea, which builds on a provision of the 2017 Trump tax bill, is one of the few tax provisions to have survived the recent negotiations, at least for now. However, Democrats are currently considering including a tax break for the wealthy in the reconciliation bill. Democratic negotiators are working on a repeal of the SALT deduction cap for up to 5 years, which would cost $475 billion and give the richest 5% $400 billion in tax cuts. Bernie Sanders said in a scathing statement on Tuesday, "This is beyond unacceptable." It's not beyond unacceptable. It's totally within the remit of acceptability. It's completely ordinary, recognisable, consistent behaviour and legislation if the function of government is to manage dissent, extract wealth, place it in the hands of private institutions. If that's its function, it's doing a damn good job. But that's just what I think. Tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments below whether you think there's any possibility for change. If you think people shouldn't pay tax if they're really well off and they've earned that money themselves. And also, if you enjoyed this video, have a look at this cheeky little guy. And if you need to access some deep spiritual power now, having been disillusioned by the corruption that goes on about the world, please have a little quick meditate. Most importantly of all, please sign up to my mailing list so I can stay in regular communication with you, tell you what I'm reading, what I'm thinking, what podcasts I'm listening to and participating in. Most of all, please stay free.